The church has gotten really good at answering questions that I'm not sure that anyone is really asking. For example, have you ever used one of these sermon titles? I have. The Heart of Worship. I know it's a good song, but is it a relevant sermon title for answering a question? Or The Names of the Lord? Or Ultimate Sacrifice? That sounds so metal. Or Rooted? Or Faith Like a Mustard Seed? Or Turn or Burn? Just kidding. I know you've never used that one. How about The Power of Being Meek? Or Facing Giants? Or A Generous Heart? Or Priming the Pump? These are in honor of the upcoming stewardship season. Or Citizens of the Kingdom? Or The Living Water? Or The Cost of Discipleship? Now, topically, all of these sermons are probably right on. Well, maybe not Turn or Burn, but for the most part, these sermons are definitely the kind of thing that Christian leaders should discuss. But I think it's important for us to entertain a question regarding whether or not these titles allude to the kinds of questions that people who are not fluent in the language of Christianity are asking. Are these sermons answers to questions that people outside the church want to know about? If you search words like, say, anxiety, or work and life balance, or parent-teen conflict, or loneliness, how far do you need to scroll before seeing content offering a spiritual perspective? Well, I tried it, and you have to scroll a long, long ways. Now, I'm not saying that Springfield First Church should be at the lead of a Google search for a category like anxiety. All I want to suggest is that we could use an awareness of current topical issues when crafting our content, especially content that is distributed in the digital arena, including sermons. Social listening is one way that we can put our fingers on the pulse of what issues and ideas we can engage with our valuable spiritual perspectives. Nelson Musonda felt this kind of empty space between the words of the church and the needs of the people. With a background in user experience and digital marketing, he developed the Dell Method website, a really helpful resource for thinking about evangelism and outreach through digital means. Nelson is our adjunct professor for this session of Pastoring in the Digital Parish, your resource and connection for ministry in the digital realm. My name is Ryan Dunn. I'm the host of this podcast and a fellow practitioner of digital ministry. We're going to let Nelson share with us his story of discovery and then offer us some tips for engaging in social listening with an ear for spiritual outreach. So let's get to become internet trolls for Jesus. Nelson Musonda, thank you so much for joining us on Pastoring in the Digital Parish. I would love to get to learn a little bit about your story. For example, how did you get involved in doing the Dell Method and digital ministry consulting?
All right. Thank you so much for having me. My journey in digital evangelism started in 2017, early 2017. And my background is I'm a designer. So I design websites and graphic design, as well as digital marketing. That's my background. So in 2017, something happened. I had what was supposed to be a little medical procedure. You know, when you go to the doctors and they say, only 0.0% or 0.01% get complications. That was me.
Yeah, you were the 0.1%. Okay.
Yeah.
Dang.
So what happened was, as an immigrant to the United States, church was more than just church. It's a place where I would go to, after working so much with school and all that. Church was something. It was much, much bigger than just church, a place for worship. So when that procedure happened, I couldn't go to church for the rest of the year. And suddenly something so important to me was taken out, So church for me was very important, It was a very important aspect in my life. And when that was taken, I felt like it was taken away from me. And the fact that then there was nothing online, when you needed church, the only way to enjoy church was to physically be there. But when that happened, it didn't sit well with me, because coming from the digital world, marketing and stuff like that, I knew that the business world had already created experiences online that made you feel like you're part of, whatever it is, the physical space.
Yeah.
And so that triggered me. I started doing research as a designer. Part of what I do mostly is research, trying to figure out, hey, what is it that, or problem solving rather, what is it that I can do? What is it that we can do to make sure that this does not happen? So when I started the research, I went deeper and deeper into it to try and find first if there were people who were experiencing the same problems that I had and how they were dealing with it. And so, of course, I went to sites like Quora.com. I went to Reddit, Facebook groups. And the more I dug into it, the bigger the problem I discovered. Because, yes, you have it.
Well, yeah, were you finding a lot of other people who were in the very similar situation to you in those spaces?
Yes. So there were people that, like, there's a lady that I contacted. I think I found it on Reddit, who was saying that church was for the physically able. So I reached out to her during the conversations, and she told me she had been in church for like maybe 30-40 years, and then at some point she couldn't go to church because she just fell ill. And for some time, church members would go pick her up, take her to church. After that, it died off. And she actually was complaining that, how is it that the one thing that we depend so much on is taken away when you're not able to attend it. And that really didn't sit well with me,
Yeah.
And that's what set the whole thing going.
It's interesting how you went about that. So first of all, thanks for sharing that. I feel like that's total validation for what we do in digital ministry, and hearing a story like that. But you went out to these different places digitally where people were connecting. Did you find that in those spaces like Reddit and Quora, were people connecting over spiritual themes in those places? Were you entering into spiritual conversations?
Yes, there were some groups that were involved in spiritual discussions, but I think my main goal was to find out really what, because another thing that I discovered was during my research, I discovered that about 57% of the young people who had grown up in the church had left the church, and in another study, they say about 23% of the Christians had left the church. Okay, 23%. So they did not leave God, but just left the organized church.
Yeah. Okay.
And in digging deeper into that, I discovered that most of them, one of the common reason they did that was that the church was not meeting their needs. So again, because of my background, I knew already that the business world already has ways of meeting people's needs. We know this because either subconsciously we we are able to partake in whatever they are doing, either buy or consume, whatever it is, because they've discovered that people have needs. And unless you meet those needs, people, leave. And so that's what I discovered.
So is that what Dell Method is about? Discovering those needs?
Yes.
Okay.
So the story goes on. So when I discovered that, I said, oh my goodness, I need to start spreading, people need to, the churches need to exist in on the internet. And this is not just about televangelism, evangelizing or just posting sermons. They really need to have a presence. And so in 2017, when I felt better, I started with my own church, other churches around here. And to my surprise, they heard my message, but they didn't take it seriously because it didn't make sense then, Actually, I got pushback at some point because people were saying, the things you're teaching, people will stop coming to church, And I remember saying that, it's not because of what I'm teaching, but a time is coming when people will not be able to come into church to consume the gospel.
This was pre-2020, right?
Yes.
You weren't predicting a pandemic. You just saw the natural flow of our culture was saying, Sunday morning is becoming a little bit more of a conflicted time. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So when COVID hit, that changed everything because now, people had no choice. Okay. So with the Dell method, I realized that the people that were getting back to me during the COVID to help them set up the, streaming and stuff like that, I found out that they were taking the same blueprint from the offline church into the cyberspace.
Yeah.
Okay. And you and me know that does not work because there are fundamental differences between the people that come to church and the people that are consuming your media online. And so I had to again go into my problem solving mode to try and solve this because they're telling me we're posting online, but no one is finding our information and stuff like that. So that's how the Dell method started, because the Dell is just simply an inverted triangle. And because I discovered that with the church setup, it works like a triangle, kind of. So, like for instance, the pastor or the preacher decides what to preach on. And because when people come to church, they are ready to receive whatever is presented to them. They sit there and listen. Online, it's different. The journey online starts with intent. It starts with a search. Probably starts with a problem that someone is facing. Then they go online to search. So the journey does not start with the church leadership at the top or the preacher. It starts at the bottom. So that's where the Dell method came in. I had to flipping the triangle into a Dell.
I love what you've done there because there's this fascinating marriage to me in my mind between the church and your background in user experience.
Yes.
Are there definite user experience principles at play in how you see the church engaging in evangelism in a digital way?
Yes. And because of my background as a designer, I had to look at everything through those lenses. And most of it was research, actually, trying to see how we can problem solve that. So most of it, yes, it's user research and experience.
Yeah. So what did that research look like for you? What were your research methods?
So again, I looked at, of course, people that were experiencing this already, you know. So another thing I ran into because of the experience I had before the COVID, where I was presenting this to the churches, and they were just not taking it. I'm sure you know that the church is usually the last to adapt to new things, new technologies.
Oftentimes, yes.
yes. So what I did was I knew there was a process that we've already used, in the marketing, and I knew if the church was to implement this, it would definitely work. But then I had to validate it, and so I went back to the Bible this time to see, and most of it I was looking at the ministry of Jesus Christ and how he carried out his ministry and stuff like that. And to my surprise, it's like the digital world took out it's like a formula in there that they took out, the exact blueprint. And that opened up my mind. I was like, wow, this is, how come we're not using this? And so, and so the DEO method is simply like a process, okay? And it simply says, in order for you to serve, you have to know your audience, And the formula that I found, it's being played out in almost all the major stories that we know of. Let me go through the steps. So the first one is know your audience. You have to know them well. Okay? Discover their struggles and pain points. Otherwise, you're giving them things that they really don't need. And then discover their needs. It's like, I talk about the needs. It's like when you have a headache, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Take a painkiller.
Take it,
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's you need to know that this is what people expect when they have these struggles. This is what they expect. Okay, so know their needs, and then find a solution, and then the best way to deliver that solution, and then the next thing will be just making sure that you measure, and then nurture. Okay, and then what happens next is the call to action. Okay, and if you look at most of the stories in the Bible, I like giving the story of when Jesus was trying to find his disciples. Okay, he met Simon Peter and his friends and brothers and friends who had been fishing the whole night. Okay, so you can say that when Christ approached them, he already knew, their needs. He knew who they were. Okay, and then he told them to cast the net into the waters again. Okay, what he was trying to give them then is he was trying to meet their needs at that moment. Okay, meeting their needs, and of course he found the solution to that. And then when they took out the net, it was full of fish. Okay, and the Bible says they left they left the fish to follow him. He then gave them the call to action. Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. Okay? So many stories. Look at the Samaritan woman at the well. Okay? We know that Christ knew her before he met her. He knew exactly where to find her, what time she went to the well. Because of that, he knew the right words to say to her. Okay? And we all know the rest of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I don't think she even carried that bucket of water. But she went out into the streets.
That's right.
Told the others. Okay? So you see that this formula is played out throughout the Bible.
Yeah. All this begins with knowing your audience.
Yes.
And that's a clarion call for churches right now, because when we start talking about a digital audience, our digital audience isn't exactly the same as the audience who we assume it was, the audience that maybe we knew in 2019 that was
exactly
coming to join us in worship every weekend, week after week. So are there some ways that we get to know our audience, or that you recommend churches get to know their audience in digital space?
Yes. So remember, I talked about the 23% of people that were in church and they've left.
Who had left.
They're claiming no affiliation to any religion. So that means they are consuming anything, whatever meets their needs at that point. Okay? So most likely than not, you will be reaching out to an audience that already knows God. Okay? So in trying to know your audience, actually it's even easier online than in the physical space. Okay? So the best way to find out is ask. And we all know that, they say charity begins at home. Okay? When you have a church membership of, the physical church membership of 200 members, and you know them very well, that means you know their struggles, their needs. Every person in there in the church represents maybe 1 million, 1.2 million of people out there, because the same problems they experience is what others are experiencing too. So as a church, it's important to know your members at a deeper level. That's why we start by asking, and you ask simple questions. Even if it's like when it comes to sermons. By the way, I met another lady on Quora, I think, who told me she had been depressed all her life and had stopped going to church because for 40 years she had never heard a sermon that talked about depression, or even programming at church that talks about depression. So she had to rely on outside sources, to help her. But she went to church every Sunday. Yeah. She had family there and stuff like that. So when you have loopholes like that, then people slip through,
Yeah.
So start from church, know your audience, your members. Make sure you ask them when it comes to your spiritual needs. What are your challenges? When it comes to raising kids, Christian kids, or when it comes to a Christian home, whatever it is, what are your challenges? Okay? Let people tell you what their challenges are. Okay? And then as a church, as a leadership, you go out and find those solutions for them. So you can imagine if you're a pastor and the church 200 people strong, some churches are 1,000, they give you all this information. Guess what? You have so much to preach from, Then you're able to connect their problems to the gospel, and people are you're able to do two things at the same time. Okay? So you have to ask. That's the first thing. That's the way. And then the next thing we'll probably talk about is the social listening.
Okay.
So social listening is part of the knowing your audience strategy, because all you're doing, it's like, I want you to imagine you're put in charge of listening to people's prayers. Okay? And imagine we talked about Christ knowing who his audience was. Most of us do not have that gift. Okay.
Right. We could just see, I would look at Andrew and be like, I know what Andrew needs. That does not. Okay.
Yeah, we don't have it. Sometimes we don't even know what we want ourselves.
You're
and
right.
So being able to know what people are talking about, that's what social listening is at the core of it. But it also starts from, there is a step that I missed, the first step actually, when you're starting your digital ministry, that is finding a problem you want to solve. Because even Christ, Christ solved problems. Okay? When you talk about miracles, a miracle is simply a problem solved.
Yeah. Oh, right on.
Yeah. Simply a miracle, a problem solved. So when you identify those problems you want to solve, those are the same keywords that you're putting in the social listening apps.
Okay.
So let's say if you have a ministry that wants to help struggling single parents, struggling to raise their teenage daughters, whatever it is. Okay, you put into the social listening app, then it listens. Yeah, so it's like you listening into someone's greatest challenges, and the best thing is that information is presented to you every day. You don't have to go look for it. So basically that's what it is.
Tell me a little bit about that. What kind of apps are you recommending for engaging in that social listening?
There are several apps. The first one I would do is Google Alerts, because it's free, and I start with Google Alerts because Google is the hub of all information.
Yeah.
Okay. So you
and most
sign
people
up.
are using it. Yeah.
Most people are using it. So you sign up and then just put in those alerts, depending on the keywords, should I say, depending on the problem you're solving. And then, every day Google will send you a report. So you can click the link, go over there to where the discussion is taking place, and you see what people are talking about. You're also able to contribute and help people that way. Yeah.
And do you find yourself doing some hashtag monitoring in that kind of scenario as well?
So I don't do hashtag, and maybe that's something I would look into. But if you go into digital ministry, you find that they don't have a lot of information, even online. When I was starting, there were very few.
I do.
Very few people, doing digital evangelism, and so most of this, there is very little data, should I say, because there's some apps that you can use to discover, maybe popular hashtags and stuff like that. But it's not very helpful because most of these conversations are carried on in groups. If you go to Facebook groups, that's where most of the conversations is going on.
And have you still found Quora and Reddit to be helpful places for engaging in some of the social listening too?
Yes. Actually, with social listening, you can actually start a social listening ministry by just connecting to Quora, typing in your queries. You can spend 30 minutes or an hour, just listening to what people are saying and responding, helping them. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like the call here is for us to continually move towards our audience. And so as part of that, we need to define who that audience is. And
yes,
that sounds a little risky maybe to some church leaders because it sounds so definite. Like we feel like there's a risk that we're going to exclude some people. And yet I believe that the future of ministry is moving towards a very defined or niched mindset. And I think that you would agree with that as well, that you encourage ministries to also identify a niche. So what are some things to consider when you are developing the target niche for your ministry?
Yeah, good question. So I get that question a lot, because when you say niche, people take it that you're excluding.
Yes, yeah.
But
we are only for single mothers or something like that, or we're only for
Yeah, but the truth is that you are including. You look at it as an inclusion. Okay, if you look at it, even if you look at the ministry of Christ, you see that everything he did was to a specific audience. That's why we're able to draw lessons for a specific situation, from what he did, because there's an audience there. Okay, so it starts from there. And then Another thing to consider is that when you're looking at digital evangelism and the church, it's kind of hard to wrap around. But this is what I say. There's a role of the church in digital evangelism, and that's not to be in the forefront of the movement. And the reason is, I don't know about you, but every time my pastor stands there to speak, I'm all ears. Okay?
Yeah.
People, we've been conditioned to listen. And as a result, the church is producing more gospel consumers than producers. Okay? So the role of the church is not to be in the forefront, but to facilitate. Okay? Because every member, every Christian has an obligation to go out and minister. So I think the important role of the church is to create that environment that encourages people to go out. In other words, that encourages people to produce rather than just consume. That's what I'm saying. So imagine if you have a church, 200 people. We got to the lowest number. Each one of them have a passion. Okay? And another thing is that with digital evangelism, you have to stop thinking about, I need to go preach, I need to go sing. So I'm saying, because digital evangelism is about problem solving. Yeah? If you remember, Christ solved the problems, and then call to action, you introduce them to the cure, the author of life and stuff like that. And so the church's role, I think, is to make sure that they create that environment that supports people to go out and do digital ministry, take up that their role, and the question.
No, I'm vibing with you. I'm agreeing. So yeah, well, it's resonating with me because when I was working on a church staff, it's something that we complain about all the time. That it's like everybody is just waiting for us, the ministers. I guess the ordained ministers or the clergy staff to do the work of ministry, right? And we kept complaining that, can't we activate all the people to be in ministry, the ministry of all believers? How do we do that?
Amen.
And so this is very much a model focused on inviting people to just kind of be ambassadors for Christ in whatever space they're going to occupy. Is that fair to say?
That's fair. Yes.
And so in terms of building ministry, it's very entrepreneurial in a way, because we build our ministries then on, it sounds like you're recommending, on the things that we're interested in.
Yes. Yeah. It has to be out of passion.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people ask me, most of the emails I get is, how do I use technology? I have this passion. How do I use technology? So imagine if the church would come in now and facilitate that. What is it that you need? Is it the technology? Do you need the website and stuff like that? And start, creating that environment that,
being a resourcer. Yeah.
Yes.
I heard a great analogy once that the church is like an airport. You don't fly to get to the airport. You fly to get to your destination, but you get to that destination through the airport. And this is really a model putting that into practice, where you are being enabled to be in this destination of representing Christ in a given situation. The church is going to help resource doing that.
To resource, yes, definitely.
So do you see then, or do you recommend that churches start taking seriously the idea that we need to have tech equippers, tech chaplains, so to speak, or even design process thinkers, or or user design and experienced thinkers on staff?
Yes. Yes. Actually, if you go to indeed.com and try and look for either digital evangelism or something to do with digital in the church, you see so many churches opening up to that idea. You know, I want you to think about, both the church and the business world are after the same people. Okay? And somehow the business world has found a way to get the messages across. Okay? By the way they design their things, the way they write their copy, everything. And they've invested billions of dollars in that. Okay? And then when it comes to the church, we are so, I don't know if modesty is the term, but we're so laid back. Okay? And we forget that, let me just step back. When I was young, the church was everything. We heard everything from church. We went to church 3-4 times a week. Okay? That's where we heard, lessons, everything. So now, even then, when you had a question, guess who you asked? Your pastor.
You went to the church.
Sometimes you waited till the next church service and asked the question. These days, that's gone. Everyone is moving around with their tablets. They have a question they're asking. Okay? And then people are finding answers online. But the question is, how good are those answers? Because if the church is not feeding the internet with the right information, then we're just leaving it to the business world to create those answers. So I'm saying, so the business worlds are creating solutions to the problems that the church can actually meet. And so the church just becomes a place where we just come to consume, And I think if we empower people, again, going back to that point, empowering people to be producers, because when you're a consumer, when you don't like something that you're consuming, what do? You move away to another thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's why we see these numbers. 23% of people say, not affiliated to any church. But when you become a producer, and you don't like what you're producing, what do? You improve. That's where you go to the church for more training, for more help, so you can produce better. And so I think, I just want to emphasize on that point, there's a role of the church in all this, and it's not in the forefront.
But in order to get there, we actually have to anticipate and participate in the questions that people are actually asking.
Yes.
Which is what you're getting to with the social listening.
Yes.
I get it.
Yes.
Yeah. I've often bemoaned that the church can be really good at answering questions that people aren't actually asking.
Exactly.
This is a great way for us to put our finger on the pulse of where people are for today.
Yes.
Certainly you can learn a lot more about that through delmethod.com. I'll just throw it out there that, for me, the website was a rabbit hole. There are a ton of really useful blog articles on that website. So I thank you for producing it, and certainly encourage other people to check it out. And is that really the best place to get a hold of you, Nelson, for people that want to follow up with questions?
Yes.
Cool.
That's the main hub. Yes.
A great follow-up to this session would be our Season 3 session with Brad Larvik called TikTok, Pastoral Care, and Puppets. It's a great story about meeting real-world needs in virtual space. Another good episode related to this topic would be Season 1's Becoming a Micro-Famous Minister with Matt Johnson. Matt there gives us some insight on simply being incarnational presences of grace in digital arenas. I'm Ryan Dunn. I'd like to thank resourceumc.org, the online destination for leaders throughout the United Methodist Church. They make this podcast possible. And of course, they host our website, pastoringinthedigitalparish.com, where you can find more online resources for ministry. I'll speak with you again in a new episode next week. In the meantime, peace.